Hello everybody, and today we're going to continue learning the blueprints by creating a new first-person shooter. It's not going to be something fancy or special, it's just going to be a character who can shoot, aim down sight, and reload their weapons when the ammo runs out. So to start, let's create our new project. Let's go into the Create New Project, Games, and this time we're going to select the first-person template. Next, call it whatever you want, FPS game, that's the way I'm gonna call it. Now I'm gonna change this quality, actually can I? I can't, never mind. I'm gonna hit create project. Awesome. Now that you have this thing open, the first thing I'm going to mention is that we're not going to be utilizing the assets that's available in this particular template, but instead we're going to go into another project which is available in the Epic Games launcher under Learn, and go all the way down to this, the shooter game. Get the shooter game, and the whole purpose of this exercise is going to be taking the assets from the shooter game and reusing them in our own game. And if you go into the shooter game, let me just showcase and launch it. I'm going to showcase what's available in there and what we're actually going to be utilizing. So once you have launched this project, you can obviously run it and see what's available here. Give you kind of a preview of what we're going to be building. This is a multiplayer project, which is not something we're looking for. But as you can see, the character has a weapon, it has some basic walking animation, you can aim down sight, shoot, and reload the weapon. And that's what we're going to have in our project as well as sprinkle. So to do that, we need to take some of the assets and move them into our own project that we've just created. And to do so, we first need to start with skeleton matches, which is going to be a thing that represents our character in the game. So if you go under the content characters, you will find something that's called Hero FPP. And in order to move this thing into our project, well, there are multiple ways you can do that. One of the ways is to go into right-click, go into Asset Actions, and you can export a selected file or a whole bunch of files. If you select them, multiple files, you click Action Assets and then export in bulk. But the easier way to do that, because we also have our project already set up, we can just tell it to migrate from one project to another, and it's going to save us some time and effort. Specifically, what you can do with migration is that you can take all the dependencies that this thing has and transfer them with this asset, which is amazing because when you're just trying to transfer this specific object, you're only transferring a skeleton mesh, which is just a model. You're not going to be transferring any textures, you're not going to be transferring any animation blueprints, you're not going to be transferring anything else, just this particular object. And that's not what we want. So to make it a lot easier, we're just going to click here, migrate, and that's going to give us the list of all the dependencies and where they are located in this project. Now, in order to prevent us from having any troubles, specifically with materials and textures, we're just going to leave them all checked. But here you can kind of tell how big this thing is and how many dependencies it has and how many things you need to make it actually work. So here we have the actual meshes, skeleton, have some other stuff which I'm not sure whether it exists here. Oh, it's a third person, no way. Materials, textures, environmental objects. Okay, let's just keep that here. Vista grass. I'm not sure we need that, but okay. We click OK. And now we need to select our project that we want to move this thing to. And in my case, it's an FPS game. And I do believe we need to check the content. And once you're inside the content folder, you can just click Select Folder. Now it's going to start migration process, which is relatively quick, even on my computer. And if you go back into your own game, you can see that you have the list of new folders. And these folders contain all of the stuff. Like these folders contain all of the stuff that we've just imported. So that's nice. And everything is set up properly, so we don't need to worry too much about the fact that our assets do not have any textures, which they should if we open them and let them compile. There we go. But that's not it. We need to also import the rest of the stuff like weapons, particle effects, everything that we might think we need, and so we don't need to return to this object in the future. So let's see. Well, probably I'm gonna need some animations, right? So to import all the animations, I'm just gonna select them and import. Asset, migrate, get all of the animations that we need. We get the character, which we don't really need, but that's okay. Get a whole bunch of textures, sounds, attenuation, foley. Okay, that's fine. Audio mixes. Alright, let's do it. Click OK. We're already in the same content folder. We just hit select folder. Now, it's gonna tell us that we already have some of the assets in there, and ask us if we want to override them. We just say no, don't override them, just copy everything that's not unique, because again, these things are referencing some of the skeleton meshes that we just imported, so we don't want to import them twice. So say no to all. And we're done with that. Now I'm also going to be separately importing the weapons, specifically the rifle and a launcher, even though we're primarily going to be focusing on the rifle, not the launcher. And yeah, just keep on doing the same thing. Just go into here, migrating, see that everything is fine. Get the rifle, skeleton mesh. Okay. Folder. No to all. Launcher, same thing. Migrate, okay. No to all. Now the last thing I'm gonna grab from here, because I'm pretty sure I've grabbed everything else. The last thing that I want are some of the special effects that we're going to be utilizing for our weapons. And maybe even sound effects. I'm not sure if they were taken care of in there. So let's go to the particle systems, effects, particle systems. Let's see, gameplay. No, we don't need that. Weapons. Assault rifle, rocket launcher sounds good. That's the hit registration. Let's migrate that. Okay. Muzzle, yeah, we do need these two. So select. Asset actions, migrate. Nice, not all. Rocket launcher. Let's see, launcher. That's a nice particle. Migrate. Okay. Okay. Not all. Muzzle. Same thing. Actions. Migrate. Okay. Folder. Not all. Let's see. Do we need some environmental stuff? I don't think so. There's nothing immediately important in here. So, I guess the last thing is slates. Nothing. The last thing that we need are sounds. So we got footsteps, we got impacts. Actually, we should be having our sounds on there, don't we? Let me just double check. Sounds, audio settings, attenuations, sound mixers. Weapons, these are the ones I'm actually caring about the most. So you have the equip. We don't have shooting, which kind of sucks. Let's grab all of that. Don't really want to grab all the sounds, but I'm going to take the impact, footsteps, projectiles, and weapons, I guess. These four. We can't do that. Kinda sucks. Okay. Bullet impact, bullet flash, metal, water. Wow. Wait, do we need that? Assault rifle, dry fire. We need that, that's for sure. So let's just grab these things. Asset action, migrate. Yes. Yes. Not at all. And same thing for grenade launcher. Ooh, that's a nice sound. Migrate. Okay. Select folder. Not at all. Let's double check that we have everything. Have wave sounds. That's great. So I think we're good. For now at least. I'm just gonna close this project and open it in case we need something else from it later. Now that we have everything in, don't forget to save all, just in case you don't want to mess this thing up. And yeah, now let's just make this thing move, because if we just play the game right now, it's going to be playing the default template, which is not what we want. Like, we don't want this ugly weapon with projectile. Kind of looks silly. I don't like that. So we need to create a new... Let's see. Let's create our new folder here, and we're gonna store everything that we've created. It's gonna be called FPS _dev _BPs. This is where all BPs are going to be located. And the first thing that we're gonna be creating is the new Brooklyn class and game mode. FPS game mode. Mode. There we go. Then we also gonna need a new player character, which is gonna be not actor or pawn. It's gonna be a character this time around, because we're actually gonna be utilizing a human being, or well, semi-human being. It's only gonna have arms in it. So FPS _player. And that's it for now. Save all, save selected. Let's go to the world settings. Change this one to FPS game mode. And change our default pawn class to FPS player. I'm gonna launch the game now. Still works. I don't like it. Let's see, we need to change the player controller. That seems to be the one thing that's driving this whole thing. So blueprint, play controller, FPS controller. Save all. Yep. Controller, FPS controller. Okay. Oh yeah. That's because this guy is over here. Let's get rid of it. We don't need you. There we go. And we have our character, which he cannot move. We need to teach him how to move, how to jump. Well, not jumping for this particular lesson, but how to move and how to look around. So let's do just that. Save everything. Let's go to our FPS player. And as you can see, it has a few interesting components added to it by default. Well, the first one is the capsule component. And if you remember from the previous lessons, I spoke about the capsule component, or any kind of collision component being at the top, at the root. It basically means it's going to be colliding with different objects and telling us if we can or cannot go somewhere. The arrow component is just there for convenience. It's going to tell us where the character is going to be facing. The character mesh is something that's going to contain, well, our character, or a representation of our character. And the character movement component is the new thing that's been added specifically for the character blueprint. And this is the one that's going to be driving most of the movement stuff that we previously had to set up manually. But here we're going to have access to a whole slew of variables to make a character look more like a human being that can walk around and do different stuff. Some of them we're going to cover later, but just so you know, it's a bit limiting in what it allows you to do. But it also has quite a lot of functionality that you can just get for free. So don't shy away from using this thing. It's fantastic, unless you're trying to force it to do something it's not meant to do. So now that we're inside this blueprint, the first thing we need to do is to start to, well, move the character. So previously what we used to do is to just get our functions, to collect input, move forward, move right. There we go. And previously we would take the speed of the character, multiply it by the input provided by the player, add the world delta seconds, make a vector out of it, take the current location of the character, add these two vectors, and that set up the new player locations. You can still do that, but there's also a different way to doing this thing, which is a lot easier, arguably. And it's only going to be working if your character has the character movement component, I believe. If it doesn't have it, I don't think it will work at all. So that's why for our previous project, for the bully hell shooter, this method would not have worked. And the function that we need to call is called add movement input. And all we need to do is to just attach the axis value to the scale value. It's going to be scaling from 0 to 1. And world direction, since it's forward, is going to be forward vector. So get actor forward vector. There we go. And just attach it to the world direction. This is where we want it to go in world space here. Next thing, the right, it's the similar thing. So just go and add movement, input, scalar over here. But since it's right, we're going to be utilizing the right vector. So get actor right vector. There we go. Attach that stuff, and now hit compile, save. If you don't have this thing saving, which you should. So when you compile, you're always going to be saving, so you don't need to smash the save button all the time. There we go. And now when you play it, you can actually move in different directions. Now, we're not making Doom, the original. We need a way to look around with our character to use a mouse, so let's add that functionality as well. And to add that, we're going to need a different type of function. First, we need to collect the input, as always. So, look up, I believe, is the one that we're looking for. No, not the function. Look up as an event. And then the next one we're looking for is turn. There we go. So look up. To make this thing work, we're gonna need to call a function called addController. Which one is it? I always forget. So roll is this way. Yaw is this way. That's a pitch. And for this one, we're gonna have to, this is turning, so that's yaw. Add controller, yaw input. I do believe I'm not mistaken here. So for this thing to work, what we need to have is, well, some of the variables that we have, like turning speed and stuff like that. So let's turn, is it turn rate? Yeah, I do believe so. Then the current value of input, turn rate, save all. Actually, we don't need that, don't we? Just attaching these two is going to be sufficient. Compile, play, and yeah, it's working. Now your character can move around and look around, as in any first-person shooter, which is great. Now, another thing. I do want that reticle that I used to have on this example. So, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. There we go. So what I did is essentially just change the game mode back to what it was, without creating a new one. And I also switched the basic character control, and this gives me a nice reticle middle, because I don't want to bother creating a new one, which is nice. So now you can move around, your character can look around, and we're off to a good start. So the next thing we could do is to actually give our character some representation. and yeah, just commenting and not leaving this thing just hanging as it is. So I'm gonna highlight this and called collecting movement input. Collecting looking input, something like that. Just to make sure that we have some sort of organization here. Compile. Alright. OBS, please behave. It just randomly pauses and disconnects, so I'm gonna be checking on this thing from time to time. Like, don't freak out if I'm gonna be popping out from nowhere. This is basically me just, you know, staging different parts of the videos that were recorded. So back to we were left with. I promised to talk about the character movement component, and it's a pretty cool thing. I like it. It's really powerful. Allows us to do lots of cool stuff. Like, for example, in here we see our movement functionalities that we added, so move forward and move right, but you don't see any speed values. That's because the speed values are actually taken from the character movement component. Like this function that we're calling, it will only work if you have the character movement component attached to your pawn, and if you do, then it's going to take all the variables that you need from it. And specifically for our case, we know that our default movement speed, movement mode, when we walk in on land, which is over here, is set to walking, and our walking speed is set to 600, and that's the value that we're utilizing to set how fast our character should be moving. We can modify this value at runtime, or we can preset it to something different. To modify this thing at runtime, we need to get our character movement component here and call set max walk speed. Now let's set it to something like really high so we can actually see the difference. Let's say 2000. And call a delay so that it doesn't kick in immediately. We can actually feel different types of movements. So for 2 seconds, complete it, set max walk speed, compile, and as you can see we're moving pretty slow, but now we're Sonic the Hedgehog really fast. And we're still recording, that's good. So now that we have this thing, what else can we do with this? Well, obviously if you want to set the walking speed, you're probably looking at something, let's say ADSing. So when you're ADSing, your walking speed is going to change, it's going to slow down, and this is the way you're going to be able to make this thing work, just by creating a separate variable for ADSing when walking, and walking speed and walking when ADSing speed, and just hooking this thing up, and yeah, setting this up whenever applicable. Another cool thing that we can do with the character movement component is that we can change the movement mode. So if you can go in here, we can see what kind of movement modes we have. Well, we have walking, jumping, falling, flying, swimming, something called custom, which we're going to go into later. So how do we change from one movement mode to another? Well, all we need to do is to call a function, set movement mode. And for some reason he added the second one, I'm not sure why, but anyways. And we need to specify which one we want to change to. So let's say we want to change to flying, which we're not actually going to fly, but we're going to see this thing change, and that's the kind of little concept. So let's go to here and say print, and we want to know which movement mode we're currently in. So just drag here, check get movement mode, drag it into a print, connect this thing, and then do exactly the same thing at the end to make sure that we are indeed in a flying movement mode. So here we're gonna add a small delay to again kind of see a difference. delay of 2 seconds. I'm gonna drag this thing out a little bit. In here. Compile. Play. As you can see, we're walking, indeed. And now we're flying. And we're not actually flying up, but if you release your controls, you can feel your character having this strange, sliding added to it. Which is a part of flying, I guess. Which is cool if you're trying to create something, let's say the ice skating, like this is perfect, or walking on an icy surface. So, there we go. Now, let's say you want to change to a custom movement mode, the one that's not available from the preset. How do you do that? Well, there's a good news and the bad news. The good news is that you can indeed do that, and you can have as many movement modes as you can possibly imagine, specifically 255. Yeah. The bad news is that it's not really supported really well from the blueprint point of view, because if you go in here, you can see that we have all of these nice walking, jumping, falling, swimming, flying, but then we have custom movement mode, and there's no way to add a new one, or new ones if we want to add more. So if we want to change this thing properly, and if we're going to be utilizing the separate movement mode in our project, we're going to be asking coders to create a child of a character movement component, and then add a custom movement modes that we want to utilize in here, so they are nicely formatted as we have others right now, with their own variables. But for Blueprint, if you want for some reason to have pain and suffering, you just need to change this thing to a custom. And when you do, let's say I want to check if we are indeed in custom, which we will be, because this is going to be changing, calling custom. So let's play. We're walking, and we're custom, but we can't move. Like, the movement functionality is not working. Strangely enough, because honestly, it probably should, but for some reason Unreal decides that if you go into custom movement mode, this thing no longer works. So, boo-hoo. What do we do? Well, we're probably gonna go into exactly the same route we did previously with our bullet hell shooter, which is we're gonna create a branch, and the branch is gonna be asking, like, what's our movement mode. If it's not equals, what are you doing? Not equals, not byte, enum. If it's not equals to custom, this thing is true, then do the regular stuff. If it is indeed custom, then we need to do the old school of setting the actual location. So set actual location, and do the rest of the goody stuff. So let's get the max custom movement speed for our movement speed here, and yeah, just apply everything else. Still recording, that's good. So, yeah. How do I want to do this thing? Let's get actor. No. Get actor forward vector. And get actor location. We're going to be utilizing the input. Yeah, sorry for it being this messy. It's literally just for example purposes. You're never going to be doing this thing. At least I hope you won't. And now we just need to add the world seconds, delta seconds, which is a delta between us calling and moving forward, like how much time has passed since we last called and moved forward. This is the delta seconds. And we need to multiply this thing. Like the speed, and then we can add these two vectors together. Yeah, a bit of a mess. And now when we play, we go into walking, custom, we can still walk. Well, back and forward, that is. Not left and right. Because we have not implemented left and right. But yeah, we can still walk. I mean, it's still working. Like, don't get me wrong. We can do that. And if we are feeling fancy, let's say we want to add more than just one custom, well, we need to change this variable over here and specify which custom mode do we want to go into. Because there could be multiple. There could be 100, not 1,000, because that's a byte. Byte only goes as far as this value, I believe. You don't. Yeah. This is the maximum number of movement modes you can possibly have. So here's the thing, though. This is kind of, difficult to know unless you specifically know what you're looking for. Like, how can we tell in which custom mode are we currently in? Well, it's a bit tricky. For the regular mode, it's kind of simple. And which is, if we drag out the movement mode and we say a switch function, which is absolutely fantastic. What it does, it effectively takes the R enumeration and it creates an output node for every single variation of our enumeration. So in this case, if we are, for example, in a walking movement mode, we can type this thing with a print and type in walking. And when we play and we're still in the walking mode, it's going to print the walking. If we are in a custom mode, it's going to print custom. So there we go. Compile, save, play, walking, and now custom. This thing is no longer needed. Not this thing, because it says custom twice. But how do we know which custom we're currently in? Well, that's a bit of a problem. I'm gonna get here and say custom movement mode. Well, normally I would say, well, we just want to, change this one into, well, just use another switch. But it's not available. What can we do? Well, we can change this to an integer, and then we can utilize a switch. Let's select switch. There we go. Now we can add different pins, which can represent different numbers that we're going to be utilizing from here. And let's say we're switching to custom mode 2, and we're going to be querying the... Yeah, don't do that. We're going to be querying this thing, saying custom 0, custom 1, and custom 2. Let's get rid of default because we don't need it. Starter index is something we can set up. And now when we play this thing, if we set up everything correctly, it should say that we are in a custom 2 mode. So walking, custom, custom 2. There we go. The first custom is from this thing, so it's working correctly. Yeah, that's, as you can probably tell, a major pain in the butt. I never use this, I've never seen other people using this, and therefore I do not recommend using this, unless you absolutely have to. The way that I usually circumvent utilizing this thing and, switch into different custom modes is I just use the walking mode, and I have my own enumerator which determines the state of my character. Is he walking, flying, jumping, and everything else? So I'm not really utilizing this thing unless I absolutely have to. I mean, I can use the jumping and falling because that's nice to have. I can use flying and swimming if I really need to. But if I need something outside of this, something unique and something completely custom, I'm just using the walking, or whichever one is closer, and modifying its values, or trying to add new values in there. So I'm creating my own custom stuff. I'm not utilizing full functionality of a custom movement mode. The only thing I saw some people use custom movement mode for is for ragdoll, but I can't really comment if it's a good thing or bad thing. It's just something I saw people utilize at some point. So another cool thing you can do with the custom movement component is, well, if you look at the possible movement states, we don't see anything like crouching, for example. Well, that's because crouching is a separate thing of its own, and we can tell our character to crouch if it has a character movement component, and it's indeed going to crouch. So to do that, we're going to go into the begin play, we're going to add a delay. Actually, not begin play. Let's do it the fancy way and actually implement some sort of crouch functionality. Go to input, button key, say crouch, and press this thing to C. And also let's add our testing button. So test to the button Q. That's how I usually set it up. Close this thing. Call the crouch. Actually, did I call it crouch? Yeah, I call it crouch. There we go. And now we need to tell our character to, well, crouch. What's also cool is when we tell our character to crouch, it triggers events, and one of those events is start crouching and end crouching. And we can do different stuff on these events. So when we start crouching, I want to say, well, so started crouching. And let's say when I press this thing again, actually, is this gonna... There's no uncrouch. There is uncrouch, wow. I actually didn't know that. So when we are uncrouching, when we release the button, then I'm gonna call and crouch event. And we're gonna call it stopped crouching. Now, if we try to write this thing right now, it's probably not going to work. It does work, which is kind of weird, but okay, I'll take that. So yeah, we are started crouching, releasing, it stopped crouching. But normally, if you want this thing to work, the crouching properly, you should go into the character movement component, and then oh! Hold on a second. Did I? Yeah, I think I did. This thing should be checked in, like can crouch should be checked in. I don't think it does it automatically. So compile, save, and if you didn't work, that's the reason why. Like I have crouch, can crouch set to false right now, and it should not, yeah, it does not work. So yeah, there we go. I guess I did this thing before. So we're gonna go here, we can click can crouch, compile, and it does work. Nice. There's also a variable which dictates how low you can crouch, like what's your actual height, and that's called a crouched half height. You can set it to whatever you want, to let's say 50 or something else. But essentially what it does is it scales the capsule of our character. If you go to viewport, you can see the values of capsule half height, set to 88 by default, but we can set it to 40. This is how big you're going to become when you're crouching. So that's basically what it does. And that's pretty much it, I guess, for the character movement component. Like, it's pretty powerful. You can absolutely utilize it. There are some limitations, of course, if you use in blueprints. But these limitations are not really enough to prevent you from doing what you want to do, at least in my experience. There are some exceptions, like let's say proning. Proning doesn't really work right off the bat from this capsule component, as far as I could tell. Like, you can't actually rotate this thing in any shape or form. And if you're trying to change the capsule size, this is not really proning. I mean, you could use it for proning, but it's a pretty bad solution, at least in my opinion. I know there are ways that people figure out how to do proning. I haven't seen them yet, but if you are still curious, just poke me at some point. I probably will be able to tell you how to do that stuff. Normally I would just write my own stuff. I would not use the character movement component. I would use something different instead of a capsule, and do some really nasty manipulations with different types of collision components. The only problem is that the character movement component, it depends on it relies on your character having a capsule. I don't think it will work as well if you're utilizing something different, like if you're trying to use a cube or a sphere. I don't think it will work as well. There's going to be some issues with that. So yeah, if you are utilizing the character movement component and the character in general, you're probably going to be stuck with capsule unless you try to make something of your own, which can be a problem, but not something you probably should worry about right now. So this wraps it up, and in the next lesson we're going to look into our animation blueprints, skeleton meshes, skeletons in general, what do they do, how we can trigger animations to play in response to our character actions. And yeah, see you in the next lesson.